Goodman is a total complete lunatic.
So there's this lunatic guy. His name is H.A. Goofman. Of course, it's H.A. Goodman. It's just a little bit of a twist. Now, he is an absolute lunatic. Okay, this guy is totally unhinged, totally off the deep end, just total maniac all around, pretty much. I mean, there's really no way around him being a maniac. He's just truly, again, off the deep end. He's somebody who was at least ostensibly a Bernie supporter during the primary. Now, apparently, he might have always been a fraud who just jumped on the Bernie train. That's what it seems to be, because I guess it turned out that he was a Ron Paul supporter, and there's no ideological consistent way to be a Ron Paul supporter and then be a Bernie Sanders supporter. You would have to be really dumb and just flip flop for no apparent reason, because the economic philosophy of Bernie Sanders and Ron Paul are fundamentally could not be further opposed from each other. Now, there's some, rare intersections, like, both of them are against subsidizing corporations. But for the most part, they want a flat tax and they just want to abolish a bunch of governmental agencies. They surely don't want government in healthcare, etc., etc. So this guy, remember the video that I did about him where he had that whole election meltdown where he was proclaiming for like weeks before the midterm election. He was like, the Republicans are going to maintain the House despite all of the numerical data of polling that showed that the House was going to for sure go Democrat. It would have taken an insane miracle for it to go Republican, and the Senate was clearly going to go Republican. He decided to proclaim that the House was going to stay Republican. It was going to remain Republican. And so throughout the process of that night of the election, he was just losing his mind. He was losing his mind trying to wrap his head around and talk about how they were losing. It was so unbelievably hilarious. If you have not checked that out yet, it's pure comedy. I strongly, strongly, really heavily recommend you go check that out. Now, in that video, I made a point to point out that behind him there's like a bunch of posters. One of the posters up there is George Orwell. Now, H.A. Goodman's basically a right-winger now. He said that he's endorsed the entire GOP for the midterm election because he wanted to stop the blue wave. He supports Donald Trump, so just 100% right-winger. That's what we have now. He's also been attacking Medicare for all, etc., etc., okay? So he's got George Orwell behind him. Something that a lot of people don't know, I would venture to say a majority of people in the United States don't know, is that George Orwell was an actual democratic socialist. Not the democratic socialist like AOC or Bernie Sanders, an actual democratic socialist, someone who believes in direct democracy and a democratized workplace, meaning workers owning the means of production. So he is very left. That's pretty hard left, okay? Really, the only way to get further than that is you're talking about, like, anarcho-syndicalist. Being an anarchist, really all you can go. Now, he's going to talk about this because he was live streaming, and some people brought up to him that, hey, you have a George Orwell poster behind you, and he's a massive leftist. Why do you have that behind you if you're going to be a Donald Trump supporter and a GOP supporter? And there's a bunch of stuff to respond to here because it's hilarious. Check it out.
He's a total complete lunatic. H.A. is a lunatic. He likes Trump. All 63 million people who voted for Trump are lunatics.
How many people voted for Trump? Let's see. How many people? It was 63, right? Presidential election results. 306 electoral college votes. Yeah, baby. That's right. I like that. Let's see. Hmm. 62,979,879. So 63 million people voted for Trump. They're not all lunatics. No, they're not.
A lunatic.
Stubby Jefferson, that's right. Bill Priestap is gone. David Kaplan, thank you again. I mean, I think that, like I've been saying, like, it's going to take place. It's going to take place. It's just a matter of when. And when it takes place, oh my God, could you imagine? It'll be like, it will be the most amusing. You definitely want to be here. Yeah, George Orwell also wrote 1984. My God almighty. Oh my God almighty. He also wrote Why I Write, where he talks about verbal euphemisms. But before that, he talks about verbal refuse as euphemisms. Before that, do you think that George Orwell, who wrote 1984, would love John Brennan and James Clapper and James Comey and Peter Strzok, all the people that Democrats love? Of course not. And the Democratic Socialists like Beto, they're like, oh yeah, Trump worked with Russia. So, yes, he would probably want Medicare for all, only if a country could afford it. That's the issue. There's such a vapid viewpoint of history and just knowledge. People on the left that have like a very limited knowledge base of any, like, read Animal Farm, read 1984, read Why I Write. You think George Orwell would be like, Trump worked with Russia to let people know that Bernie was cheated? You think he would like kiss the behinds of the intelligence agencies? No wonder that guy doesn't want to debate me. Stooch! 1984 was not an instruction manual. It was definitely an instruction manual for Democrats. Snooch! 1984 was not an instruction manual. Exactly. Snooch, great. That's a great point. That's a great point. David Kaplan. I hope not. David. Yeah, the Democratic model, the liberal model, the centrist liberal model like Obama, Macron. It's like, I agree with you. They utilize, George Orwell would never stand for intelligence agencies providing quote unquote evidence in the form of confidence. George Orwell wrote 1984 to stop Democrats from engaging in this type of Russia did it because John Brennan said so mentality / conspiracy theory. You're dang right I have George Orwell in the background. Not saying that he would be a Republican, because I'm not a Republican. I'm still a registered Democrat, but he definitely would not be a Democrat. He wouldn't be even this brand of Democratic Socialist either, because the Democratic Socialists, most of them, the Democratic Socialists, I'm Jewish, buddy. So that should pretty much give you, an understanding to that question. But as I block you from this live stream. Anyway, no wonder there's no discussion. Why would anyone want to debate? Because it was like, look, people on the left don't want to debate me because I'll call them, because I'm from the left, so I understand exactly where they're coming from. I agree on certain things, and they can't go at me with the kind of like, oh my God, look how stupid this is, because I'm not really a conservative 100%. So I can call them out on their hypocrisy. They would never debate me. Never debate me. And it's like, if you don't know anything about George Orwell, don't bring up the fact he'd be a Democratic Socialist when Democratic Socialists nowadays are bringing up the Trump-Russia probe. So, Orwell would probably lean towards being libertarian more so than today's Democratic. Rose Quartz, thank you. So I can tell you right now that George Orwell would not vote for a political party.
So first off, He says that Beto O'Rourke is a democratic socialist. So let's be clear here. AOC and Bernie Sanders are not a democratic socialist in the sense of George Orwell's democratic socialist. George Orwell is an actual democratic socialist who believes in the democratization of the workplace. AOC and Bernie Sanders believe in capitalism, just with the heavy welfare state, which is fundamentally massively different. So Beto O'Rourke is kind of a democratic socialist, not really in the new neo term, if you will. He's a social democrat per se, but if he's a social democrat, anyone's a social democrat, because it has now come out basically that he had voted against Wall Street deregulation. He also met with AIPAC, which H.A. Goodman I'm sure likes because he's a shill for the Israeli government. So, don't bring up Beto O'Rourke and claim that he's like AOC or Bernie Sanders. He's just another one of the neo-libs, pretty much, almost, basically, okay? We know because of what has come out recently, we found out about him. Now, also, again, I want to re-explain here because he claims that George Orwell would be a libertarian, which is totally false. Now, he's not talking about the term libertarian in the classical sense. If he was, then he would be close, but he's not talking about libertarian in the classic sense. I highly doubt he even knows that libertarian in its classic sense was a lefty ideology. It was anarchism. I don't even think he knows that. So he's not talking about the classic sense. He's talking about the American libertarian sense, which is all about private property rights and fuck the government and get the government out of my face, and all that kind of good stuff, right? So that could not be further from the truth because George Orwell was a democratic socialist, very hard left. He believed in the workers owning the means of production. That is very, very solid left. Read Homage to Catalonia, and he says, read Animal Farm, read 1984. Everyone's read Animal Farm, dude. That's the reason why most people don't know George Orwell as a democratic socialist. Everyone sees that he was in opposition to the USSR, and everyone thinks immediately that he's I don't even know if you would call it right wing or just not far left wing. He's far left wing, okay? He's just not authoritarian. He's somebody who is a democratic socialist. If you read Homage to Catalonia, what that is about is George Orwell literally served, I believe, was in the military in Catalonia, anarchist Spain. That's one of the main examples you can come up with in terms of, when has socialism really worked? Now, I would still sort of come to the conclusion that it could have exposed a fatal flaw that, the defense forces aren't very strong in anarchist societies for a flurry of different reasons, and I'm not an anarchist, but that's probably the best example you can come up with of a good socialist country is Catalonia, anarchist Spain. So they legitimately had anarchism, workers-owned industry. He talks about how all you saw was anarchism, and it's pretty crazy. It was just straight up workers owning everything, and wherever you went. He literally served and fought against the fasces of Francisco Franco. He fought against them. He literally enlisted in the army. So you could even kind of I know we know he's a democratic socialist, but it's he was at least pretty close. I mean, democratic socialism is already sort of close to anarchism anyways, but I mean, dude, if you fight in defense and in favor of an anarchist society, it's pretty fair to say you're pretty damn anarchist, you're pretty close. So the point here being is that just because in Animal Farm he talks about, it's about the USSR and communism, it doesn't mean that he's not left. He was hard left. And so there's a massive irony in having a George Orwell poster behind you while you rock a MAGA hat and you, suck off the GOP and say, we need to keep the blue wave in the toilet. The guy's a lunatic. He has no clue what he's talking about. I guarantee you, he doesn't even know Homage to Catalonia. I don't think he knows what it is. I don't even think he knows what Catalonia, Spain was. And I don't think that he knows that George Orwell was an actual democratic socialist. Again, let me repeat. George Orwell is not a democratic socialist in the sense of Bernie Sanders. He's an actual original democratic socialist. We're talking democratizing the workplace. We're not talking about capitalism with the heavy welfare state. No, we're talking about democratize the shit out of that workplace. That's what we're talking about. So the thing about this whole Russia thing is, okay, H.A. Goodman is ideologically committed, okay, and this is a problem. This same thing goes for other people like Jimmy Dore. I personally am an agnostic on the issue. I'm waiting for the evidence to come out, and then I will make my conclusion. Whichever way it goes, it doesn't matter to me as long as the evidence and the facts point into that direction. That's what matters to me. So that's what I'm concerned with. Now, H.A. Goodman, if the evidence comes out against him, he's going to, scream and shout about how, the government's lying or whatever, and Jimmy Dore's going to do the same thing. I'm going to go with whatever the evidence points to. So this guy is ideologically committed. And the last point that I'll make here is, I want to say that, the whole Russia probe issue, obviously George Orwell is not going to, identify with the party over one thing of the Russia probe, because there's a whole massive group of real lefties who deny that, who don't agree with that. So that doesn't make sense in the first place. The last thing I'll say is I think he took a shot there with Medicare for All. I don't know why, but he's just a fraud. The guy is an absolute lunatic, and don't let him forget it.